We hear a lot about critical race theory these days because it's everywhere. It's a divisive creed that makes simplistic generalizations and divides humanity into oppressor and oppressed, blaming white men for all the evil in the world, rather than acknowledging some of their strengths and contributions too. The advocates of this creed consider themselves the most enlightened of us, a woke bunch whose superior intellect and open-minded appraisal puts them on a plateau high above all the knuckle-dragging simpletons who voted for Trump and Brexit. It's a strange claim from those who seek to cast all judgments in light of the most simplified generalizations imaginable, and the reaction to the shooting in Boulder, Colorado highlighted some of the errors to which this mindset falls prey, both its erroneous assumptions and its arrogant refusal to admit, or to learn from, its manifest failings. As soon as that shooting happened, they were all on the case. It was obviously a straight white male, and a Trump voter to boot. Because when you're close-minded enough to assume that dividing humanity in two can give you all the answers, then who needs to wait for facts or evidence? The results of critical race theory are plain. For all its impressive-sounding rhetoric, it compels people into brazen errors, a childish refusal to accept fault, and little but boneheaded arrogance. Because their loathing was such that it remained unaffected even when it emerged the shooter was actually a Muslim, a Syrian Arab immigrant named Ahmal al-Alawi al-Lisa, a man who had posted extreme Islamic views and who was vocal in his hatred for Donald Trump. Because this reverse racism has imbued these people with an utterly unjustified certainty. David Hoffman had claimed that, "I'll bet my salary right now that the shooter in Boulder is a right-wing, MAGA, white male." And oh, how they piled in. "Not taking that bet. Sorry, that's a loser bet. It's a known fact that most mass murderers are white males. It's their thing, unfortunately. In fact, most recent mass shooters look like this." But that didn't stop them, because the conviction of these people is limitless. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind. Definitely white. Taken into custody without incident, right? Probably got a high five from other police officers and a Whopper from Burger King. You know he's white, because he got arrested. If he was brown, he would have 20 bullets in his body out of 200 rounds fired. If the shooter was anything else, the police would have made that very clear by now. Boulder is 90% white, and most mass shooters are white. You're not actually making a tough prediction here. One of Trump's army. Taken alive, so we have to assume white. If he was also taken for a burger on the way to jail, then most definitely. I'll double that bet and add that he voted for the whack job. I bet you're right. I'd contribute significant dollars to the bet that says they also find Trump merchandise or old Trump hate rally tickets at his home. Reports are that he's a middle-aged white man. So there's that. We know he's a white male, and he sure looks the part. Give the man a cigar. Probably was not allowed in the store without a mask, so he went home and came back with his guns. Yup, a MAGA. That's how you settle disputes. Gun reform is needed. Republicans sending out their prayers can get the fuck out. That would be a sucker bet. It's hard to believe that we have so many Trumpsters in Colorado. Definitely white, because he's still alive. Wasn't that a given? No offence. White male for sure. Probably an anti-vaxxer. They were administering vaccine in the store. That was my thought too when I heard that. Your money is safe. Not even a question. I agree. Angry white man. That's what I suspect too. If the police did not shoot the suspect, He's most definitely white. 1,000%. And watches Fox News for his enlightenment. Anytime you hear of a mass or spree shooting, it's reasonable to assume it's a white male. The exceptions are rare. Sounds about white. As always, you would win that bet. The suspect is alive, so he is white. Safe bet. Absolutely no doubt about it. Duh, of course it is. Can there be any doubt he is a Trump Bobert supporter? Literally just said this to my husband. Last week, another white killer killed 8 women, and 6 of them Asians, American, Korean, and Chinese. Today, another white killer cops and 10 people died. What is wrong with these 2 white killers? Exactly. White privilege. They should ask him if he wants something to eat too. This misses the point. You should be more concerned that some dude with an AR-15 was able to walk into a supermarket and kill 10 people. It doesn't matter what colour the shooter's skin was. No. It matters. Your white privilege is showing. What the hell is wrong with white men that whenever they're frustrated or angry or upset, they think the appropriate action is to take a weapon designed purely for killing people into a school or a bar or a store or a massage parlour and just randomly murder innocent people? Right, I think they stopped to get him a burger on the way. Second time in a week an armed white man was arrested without shooting him first. If black or brown, armed or unarmed, they would be dead. Heartbroken about this tragedy again here in Colorado. What is it with white men snapping and deciding to go and shoot innocent people? Gun laws must be reformed now. With or without his MAGA hat. They asked him several times to exit his vehicle. It's sickening. Sounds like another bad day for a raging MAGA gun-toting terrorist. Christian white man. These Trump supporters are making other Trump supporters look bad. Just made the same comment, and he's been treated in a hospital. What more do you need to know about white privilege? I'm having a hard time picturing any mass shooters being people of colour. Can anyone refresh my memory? Were they killed on sight? It seems like these shootings are predominantly by white assailants. I was just having this conversation. If the murderer had been a person of colour, he would have been riddled with bullets. The difference is absolutely disgusting. Sadly, so true. I'm waiting for cable news to start pointing this out. And when these types of shootings occur, let the news anchors start off with, the alleged shooter appears to be a white man since he survived and was captured. Let's see how fast it becomes a crisis. This is a fact. Just hearing the words mass shooter, the odds are good that it was white. But also, of course the shooter was a white man. Checked every network tonight and everyone was bolder. Even the Canadian networks. All except Fox, which was talking about the border. Which is how I knew without looking the Boulder murderer was a white guy. The suspected gunman in the Boulder, Colorado mass shooting is a white guy. 7 reported dead. Cue mental issues, bad day, parking disputes, or anything else other than what he most likely is, a white domestic terrorist. They are always white. Most mass shootings are committed by white men, which makes it a problem about white men. And these just kept on coming. Uzair Hassan Rizzi commented that he was only apprehended and not choked or shot to death because he was not brown, black, or a Muslim. Rizzi, by the way, prides himself on debunking misinformation and fake news. Boats commented, another domestic terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado. But hey, those scary immigrants, right? While Butterfly Effect claimed that if shootings like this were done by Muslims, there'd be internment camps already. Not sure where you've been the last 20 or 30 years, mate. Hamel Javeri also popped up to assert that it's always an angry white man. Always. Now, Javeri is the race and inclusion editor at USA Today. So the irony of some of these posters was delicious. You'd hope it might have chastened these people when it emerged that the shooter was a Syrian Muslim immigrant, one who hates Donald Trump. After all, the same people have been telling us for years that Jesus isn't white because he came from the Middle East. But the arrogance of these people is so thoroughly ingrained that it's utterly immune to evidence. And when the truth was revealed, their reactions were shameless. Amy Siskind had said the shooter was taken into custody. In other words, it was almost certainly a white man. Again, if he were black or brown, he would be dead. But she then shifted to let's mourn the victims, but not glorify the killer with the attention of having his name widely known. Brooklyn Dad altered his position too, from arguing that domestic white terrorists, like the one in Boulder, continue to be the biggest threat to America, and they still apprehend them safely. But he suddenly started arguing that it doesn't matter whether the shooter's a white guy, a Middle Eastern guy, or whatever ethnicity, he is a mass murderer. Qasim Rashid was even more shameless. He posted a string of comments which claimed the incident was entirely predicated on race. He compared it unfavourably with the incidents involving Tamir Rice and Elijah McClain, and he laid all the blame on America's institutional racism. He also sneered that it must be nice having the complexion for protection. You can mass murder and folks will defend you as a nice guy who just had a bad day. He made repeated references to the fact that the killer was a white male, but when he found out the murderer was a fellow Muslim, he promptly switched tack. Suddenly, the issue at hand was the urgent necessity of passing common sense gun reform, another of his pet topics. And he even had the nerve to claim that if people want to change the subject from that, he doesn't want to hear your excuses or responses. Mina Harris tweeted that violent white men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country. She didn't apologise for that, and she attempted to justify her comment by arguing, I made an assumption on he's been taken into custody alive, and the fact that the majority of mass shootings in the US are carried out by white men, which, as we've seen, isn't actually true. But what was truly shocking was the number of people who, despite being completely wrong, simply carried on claiming that they were right. Tracy P. said, I think a lot of us had the same assumption, while a skin doctor claimed, there was no need to delete it, Mina. You were right. Even though he was a Muslim Syrian immigrant, he used to identify as domestic white male. More power to you. And on it went. A US census says he's white. I mean, the man can very well be a white Arab man. Just because he's Arab doesn't mean he's not white. He's an American-born citizen, born in Arvada, Colorado, and his shirtless belly was white. He looks white. He appears to have grown up in Arvada. He was a high school wrestler. He's an angry young man. Toxic male masculinity. Could be a fair assumption, based on who gets taken into custody alive and who makes for target practice for cops. The shooter in this case probably looked white, hence I guess why he was taken into custody alive. It really wasn't an unreasonable assumption. When I hear about a rape, I automatically assume the victim's female. He looked white, that's why he was taken alive. I saw the photo. He's white, regardless of his religion or politics. Thank you, but it was an educated assumption. Most mass shooters and serial killers are white men, I hate to say. Your analysis was based on the odds, given who has historically done this horrific stuff before. Good on you for the mea culpa, but you're not the only one who assumed that. Sure looks white to me. Mina, you are right. Mass shootings statistically are carried out by white men. Those are the facts. He is white. He's white passing, and the cops treated him as such. Just further proves our point about white light-skinned privilege. In your defence, I made the same assumptions. I also made the same assumption. Many of these mass shootings are done by white males. Regardless of his name, he is glow-in-the-dark white. Cops didn't know he had a Middle Eastern name either. I thought you had made a reasonable assumption. Meanwhile, MAGA are crying over white racism. The fact remains that statistically speaking, white men are the mass shooters in America. Not changing my view of how dangerous white male domestic terrorists are. Most people made the assumption he's white because he's still breathing. I did. First thing I said, I'm just here to watch as the people who usually defend racial profiling pretend to be outraged about making assumptions. The fact that this dude gunned down 10 people and the police didn't shoot his ass, that means he's white. We ain't going to start playing games just because he was born in Syria. The suspect is white enough to benefit from the privilege of whiteness. Right. You can just imagine how these people would have reacted if others had made assumptions that an attacker was black or Muslim, even if they'd ended up being correct. But their conceit and hypocrisy remains unaffected by even the most egregious errors. Michael Moore even found time to crow that the life of Ahmad al-Alawi shows that people can come from all over the world and truly assimilate into our beloved American culture. Right, Michael. Because they have no problems with gun violence in Syria. And this is what happens when these people's falsehoods run up against reality. Like when Bryn Rodden automatically assumed that this rapist was white. Or when it emerged that the BLM leader had spent millions of dollars on a series of luxury homes. She initially dismissed those claims as white supremacist lies. But she was quickly forced to admit that it was the truth. And she then brushed off her embezzling and nepotism as a sign of her own virtue. These shocking errors should have been a salutary lesson for these activists. But their refusal to admit error means that they've learned nothing. And they never will. If you've enjoyed this film, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in these topics, I've written 2 books which go into them in a great deal of detail. They're called The Tyranny of the Left, and they're available on the links below. Please feel free to pick them up and let me know what you think. Thank you.